But look at this. Look at this. Let's do a little dramatic reading, shall we? Here we are on The Guardian, darling. We're on The Guardian. This is a story that came out. When did it come out? Today at 5 p.m. So that would have been what, like 9 a.m. this morning, local time here in California. How the Durham inquiry backfired to show weaponization of Trump DOJ. Now, keep in mind, too, kids, we have some favorite nemesis on the Twitter bird side that seem to think that the Durham investigation, the inquiry, was going to yield quite a bit more than it did. And in fact, one Eric Garland comes to mind as a gentleman who really hitched his star to the Durham wagon. Or perhaps somebody encouraged him to hitch his star to said wagon. I don't know, darlings. I don't know. I'm just a simple host here at the lounge. I just pour the drinks, darling. I just pour the drinks. So, anyway, let's go on. But keep that in the back of your mind when you're dropping things into Eric Garland's Twitter threads, in case you find yourself, you happen to be that. Yes, you might want to and ask him how things are going over on the Durham inquiry, because he was so very, very, very hopeful that it was going to come out so far differently than it did. I fear that somehow maybe he is disappointed in that, and perhaps the people who are his new friends are highly disappointed in that as well. I don't know. I don't know. Trump Justice Department tapped a U.S. attorney to examine the origins of the FBI inquiry and meddling in the 2016 election. Conservatives and many Republicans hoped it would end the idea Donald Trump's campaign was Moscow and back his charges that some FBI officials and others had conspired against him. But instead, as the multi year investigation winds down, is ending with accusations that unethical actions by that special counsel, John Durham, and ex attorney William Barr, quote unquote, weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, we shall refer to them from here on out, to help Trump. Former DOJ officials and top Democrats are voicing strong criticism that Durham and Barr acted improperly in the almost 4 year old inquiry, citing an in depth New York Times story that added to other evidence as the inquiry looked politically driven to placate Trump's anger. Let me check and make sure that you're all still with me. Oh dear, yes, wonderful, you are. To placate Trump's anger at an investigation witch hunt. The Times report provided disturbing new details, for instance, about how a key prosecutor, Nora Danahy, quit Durham's team in 2020 over, quote, ethical, end quote, concerns, including his close dealings with Barr and discussions about releasing an unorthodox interim report before the 2020 election that might have helped Trump, but which didn't come to fruition. Critics of the Durham also noted early on that Barr, on several occasions and contrary to longtime DOJ policies, suggested publicly that Durham's inquiry would yield significant results, which in effect would help validate Trump's charges that some officials at the FBI and the CIA had led a political witch hunt. Further, Barr and Durham, in highly unusual public statements early in their investigation, tried to undermine a chief conclusion of a report by the DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz that the Russian was based on sufficient facts to warrant opening the investigation in 2016. Ex DOJ officials say that the Durham inquiry seemed aimed from the start at boosting Trump's political fortunes. Quote, it was clear to people following the Durham investigation as it unfolded that it was highly irregular from the start, said former Deputy AG Donald Eyre, who served in the George H.W. Bush White House administration. Quote, indeed, there's good reason to believe that its purpose and primary function was to create fodder to advance Trump's election prospects. End quote. Critics note that Barr tapped Durham to lead the investigation just a month after Special Counsel Robert Mueller issued a large report documenting substantial ties between Trump's campaign and Russia, and concluded that Moscow tried to sway the election to help Trump in sweeping, quote unquote, systematic ways, a conclusion Barr and Trump worked to downplay. Despite Trump's pressures and Durham's sprawling investigation, including unusual overseas trips with Barr to interview Italy and England about potential flaws in the Russia investigation. The inquiry notched just one minor conviction of a mid level ex FBI official for falsifying a document. There were also two embarrassing acquittals. And there is Five Nights at Freddy's himself, Mr. Barr. Hello, darling. How are you? I hope you're very uncomfortable right now. His report revealed, too, that Durham had uncovered evidence during his Italy trip of possible misconduct by Trump, but it's unknown what failed and how much he pursued that element of the inquiry. Durham also reportedly spent time investigating a conspiratorial and dubious lead that seemed aimed at connecting an aid to billionaire George Soros, who I'm waiting for my check, George, a leading Democratic donor to the early Russian meddling and investigation and the campaign of Trump's opponent, Hillary Clinton. Besides Nora Danahy, who left Durham's office in 2020, two other prosecutors on Durham's team reportedly left after raising concerns about the wisdom of pursuing a prosecution against a lawyer with ties to Clinton's campaign that ultimately led to an acquittal. For ex DOJ leaders and top Democrats, the latest allegations about the political motives that drove Durham and Barr to underscore earlier signs that the quote investigation into the investigators and was handled improperly. Quote, the Durham special counsel investigation was tainted from the outset by excessive involvement of Attorney General Barr in its reaching significant conclusions before it had done any significant investigation, end quote, said in the ex DOJ Inspector General Michael Bromwich or Horowitz, whatever. Bromwich must be added from the outset, quote, from the outset, there was no pretense that this was an independent investigation in which the facts would determine the outcome. The scorecard, an interminable 4-year investigation, a single conviction based on a case handed over by the AG or IG on a silver platter, and two humiliating acquittals. There has never been a record like that in the half century history of independent counsels and special counsels, end quote. Top Democrats too are incensed by the conduct of the Durham investigation and Barr's role in the inquiry. We better check that they're not even back, god damn it. Congressman Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat in the House Oversight Committee, who served on the House January 6th Select Committee that investigated the Capitol insurrection, said, quote, the whole course of the Durham investigation suggests heights of prosecutorial misconduct. It's hard to imagine a study of the weaponization of justice than what Barr was doing with the Durham inquiry. End quote. The Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Richard Durbin said, quote, these reports about abuses in special counsel Durham's investigations, so outrageous that even his longtime colleagues quit in protest, are but one of the many instances where former President Trump and his allies weaponized the Justice Department. The Justice Department should work on the behalf of the American people, not for the personal benefit of any president, end quote. Durbin added that Senate Judiciary Committee would, quote, take a hard look at these repeated episodes and the regulations and policy that enabled them to ensure such abuses of power cannot happen again, end quote. Last September, Durbin notified the DOJ that the Judiciary Panel planned to look into explosive details in a book. Oh, thank God somebody sat on a book for months. Jeffrey Berman, the ex-chief of DOJ's Southern District Office in Manhattan, about political interference by Barr and Trump loyalists in several investigations. Berman wrote that Barr in 2019 sought unsuccessfully to pressure him to conviction of Trump's ex-lawyer Michael Cohen on campaign finance violations, block related investigations into potential campaign finance violations. Blah. That was not very easy to say. Barr also pressured Berman to resign with an eye replacing him with a Trump loyalist, but after Berman refused to step down, Trump fired him. Together, the charges by Berman and the evidence amassed by the Times paint a troubling picture of how Barr seemed to lean over backwards to boost Trump politically until after the 2020 election, when Barr eventually publicly rejected Trump's claims of fraud. The Justice Department did not respond to it from The Guardian, seeking a comment from Durham, who is expected to write a final report about his inquiry later this year. Danahy did not reply to phone messages asking for comment. Barr last week told the Los Angeles Times the idea that there was a thin basis for doing bracketed the Durham investigation doesn't hold water, end quote. Barr added that, quote, one of the duties of the Attorney General is to protect against the abuse of criminal and intelligence powers, and that they're not abused to impinge upon political activity. So I felt it was my duty to find out what happened there. He said duty, end quote. Critics note that Barr's defense is weak, since Durham was tapped just a month after Special Counsel Robert Mueller issued an extensive report indicating substantial ties between Trump's campaign and Russia, and it concluded that Moscow tried to sway the election to help Trump in sweeping and systematic ways. Hold on just a moment. Oh, fuck. Hold on. Uh oh. There we go. I think we're back. Where the fuck was I? Okay. Barr's defense of the Durham investigation's launch looked shaky, too. Given public comments Barr made in congressional testimony at a Senate committee hearing in 2019, Barr was asked several times by then Senator Kamala Harris if Trump or any White House officials had suggested or pressured him to launch his sweeping review. Barr was evasive, but acknowledged some, quote, discussions of the matter had occurred, adding, quote, they have not asked me to open an investigation, end quote. For Raskin, the growing evidence of conduct in the Durham investigation comes an ironic moment as the House Republican majority has created a special panel on the judiciary into the, quote, weaponization of the government that's expected to hope, found out it already does, focus heavily on the Biden administration and the departments and the FBI, and I have a feeling they're going to throw in the NIH for good measure. Why not, darlings? Why not? The Republican majority created a weaponization committee, which is the, quote, created a weaponization committee, which is a precise and accurate description of their own activities in transforming the government to be a political weapon for Donald Trump and his inner circle, end quote. Raskin said, quote, of course, they don't have any interest in looking at the corruption of the justice system under Trump. Now, do they? I think that's it, Tids. I think we made it through the Guardian article. Lovely. Oh boy, she's back. I'm